There's nothing I love more than artists being used and exploited by their clients. Just kidding, I hate it. So, a little bit of background on what this video is going to be about. I would like to talk about pricing, specifically on illustration and graphic design work in Denmark, because I live in Denmark and I'm former graphic designer, current illustrator in Denmark, working independently. So this is very relevant to me, and hopefully it's going to be helpful to someone. The main thing that prompted me to do this video is mostly seeing posts by potential clients on Facebook groups that offer or expect very unrealistic payment for graphic design and illustration services. I would say photography falls there as well, but in this case, I haven't included it because I'm not so closely related to it. So I know Facebook is a really garbage place, but for me, it's been one of the best places to find clients, and most specifically particular Facebook groups. But you don't really find the good clients every day, obviously. Most of the time, what is out there is pretty garbage, or at least what I've seen. I'm not really sitting on Facebook 24/7 looking at posts. That would be horrible. What is even worse is what is being posted in international groups. The posts that are made in these groups are even worse than what is offered in Danish groups. And I think in general, not just with this kind of work, but with pretty much any kind of work, unless it's the very high-skilled software developers, engineers and such. The foreigners are the ones who get the shittiest jobs and who are treated the worst. And many people who haven't been here for so long, don't understand the language, don't know what is normal, get taken advantage of very easily. And I wouldn't say that I'm somehow immune of that. It has happened to me quite a lot, but I feel like I have a little bit of experience that could be relevant to share. And I think it's important for people who have a little bit of experience with this kind of things to share it, so that we all as a collective know more and are better prepared to deal with these bad situations. So I will be talking a lot about pricing in this video. I'm going to share concrete numbers. They will be in Danish kronas because that's relevant, because we're talking about Denmark. I might put the amount converted in other currencies on screen if I'm not too lazy at the time I'm editing this video. For people who might be curious to just make a comparison, I expect the prices we're going to talk about might be too high for many other places and might not be realistic in other countries. But you have to understand that Denmark is a country with a very high standard of living, very high taxes, and that means that everything is very, very expensive. So, what are these prices that we're going to talk about based off of? These are not my prices. I would say that it will be hard to say what my prices are because I take into account a whole lot of variables before I give a price to a client. So I think it's very, very hard to share pricing in general. You can only talk about specific projects. And I also don't really want to do that because I don't really feel like my prices are the best or what everyone should aspire to. I feel like I'm still probably on the lower end of things. I thought we would look into something a bit more objective, if we can say that, and that's a document called Medieaftalerne. I hope I said that to a satisfactory degree. So what is this document? This document is created by two, I believe, of the Danish unions. One is the Danish Journalism Association or Journalist Association, and the other is the HK Union. I guess that would be the name in English. And the name of the document is the Media Agreement. So basically what this document is sort of an overview of the agreement that these two unions have come to with representatives of the business for pricing that are acceptable for certain professionals. In this case, That would be journalists, photographers, and graphic designers, visual artists, because these unions are working to protect the rights of these professionals. This document is free, available on the internet for everyone to access, but it is in Danish because, well, we are in Denmark. And it might not be easy or accessible to many internationals, which is why I want to talk about it. And I've decided to translate it to English and to share it on my blog. Link will be in the description and in this video, because using 2 channels, maybe it will be possible to reach more people. And I hope that this will help more people to be a bit more informed of what is acceptable in Denmark to be paid as one of these professionals. Now, I'm going to only focus on the segment that deals with pricing for visual artists, and I'm not going to talk about journalism and photography because I don't really know that much about it. It's not my area, but that's available as well in this document. So how are you to use what I'm about to share? I think it should be used as a guideline. It's not a must. It's not what you have to do. It's not what you should do. It's what is nice to know to base your pricing off of. When I work with clients, I use this document. I also use a book that is very often recommended by visual artists online. It is based on I'm not sure whether it's American or the UK market, one of those, maybe both, and it's more maybe international. The book is called The Handbook for Ethical Pricing Guidelines, something like that. I'm going to check and write that. The one I have is from 2014, so it's pretty old at this point, but it's still a nice little guide. So yes, when you price, there's a ton of things to take into consideration. This is not a comprehensive guide on pricing, but again, one thing you could be referencing to get a more clear idea of how you should price your work, especially when you're practicing in Denmark or working with Danish clients, and especially as an international, because I'm sure there's a lot more resources for Danes. So before we start, I would like to make a couple of disclaimers, just in case. First of all, the language of this document is pretty lawyer-ish, so that makes translation tricky because I'm not a lawyer. I'm not sure I'm expressing things in the correct language. I'm not there are places where I'm not sure I'm exactly understanding 100% of what is being said. So there might be mistakes. I'm also not a professional translator. There might be mistakes. If you catch me in a mistake and you are aware of what is actually correct, feel free to correct me because I want to put the best information out there. Another thing that I have thought about is whether it is legal for me to share this information and to translate this information. I'm not aware what the copyrights of this document are. I have linked back to it everywhere. The document is available online for non-members of these unions as well. So my current understanding is that it is made for everyone to see and read and use. So I think it's okay to share it in this way and to translate it and bring it to a wider audience, hopefully. But if I am breaching any laws, I'm currently not aware of it. And if it comes to my attention that I'm going to delete all of this. And yeah, let me know. All right. I think there is nothing left but to dive into the Medieaftalerne, or the media agreement. You might see me looking off to the side. This is where my screen is and where I have this document that I'm going to refer to. Maybe here and there I'll make some comments when it's needed. Hope that's okay. So as I mentioned, we're going to look into the section that covers graphic design and illustration. The scope of this document is 1st of June 2020 to to 31st of May 2023, but it hasn't been updated last time I checked, so we accept that that's what is relevant and accepted at this time. The agreement is made between HK Privat, that sounds so funny to say in English, and the Danish Journalist Association on the union's side, and the cooperation on the side of businesses, from what I understand. I've never heard about the cooperation before, so I hope I am understanding this correctly, but in any case, it doesn't really matter all that much. So this agreement covers work delivered according to an agreement between the parties. The parties, from what I understand, the parties that would be the graphic designer or illustrator on one side and the company or the business that they're going to be doing work for on the other side. The parties commit as much as possible to agree upfront to the task scope, price, scope of corrections, amount of sketches and layouts, which are included in the price, how and when the product will be delivered, conditions of use, including rights of use, copyright, and payment. So what this says is that before you start working on a project, it is best practice to agree on this whole list of things that they talk about, and it's a very good idea to have a contract that covers all that. I'm personally using a contract that is more or less based on a standard template, but having a contract, very important, very good practice. The more you agree on upfront, the clearer you make it for both parties, the less likely it is to have problems further down the road. And this is something that is helpful to both sides, both the client and the illustrator, because most of the time people don't try to cheat each other, people don't try to lie to each other, but people forget. And if you don't have it in writing, it's very hard to agree on who said what, when, and then what was delivered. Personally, my experience as a freelancer improved dramatically since I started using contracts. And you don't always have to have something very complicated. Even just an email with some bullet points on what you're offering could be good enough. I do that with like smaller jobs where it feels like too much of a waste of time to send the proper bigger contract. Even when I send the big contract, I try to again outline some bullet points on things that are important, and just in case the other party decides not to read and then are confused about something. So just trying to be transparent and clear on what you're going to deliver, what they're going to receive, what you owe them, what they owe you. That's just going to improve everybody's experience. And maybe I should do something on contracts. I'm sure there is information out there, but also I would say when I was starting, there wasn't that much information, and it's better to have more information than less. Back to the document. The next section talks about fees, and it says all fees are excluding shipping, postal expenses, etc. So that refers to, I think, times when you deliver something physical to the client. So like maybe a physical illustration. It hasn't happened to me, but I guess maybe if you're working with like a publisher and you're, say, watercolor artist and you're sending your original, I don't think that happens. I think traditional artists would send a scanned digital file, but maybe sometimes they ship their work, so that would be charged separately, from what I understand. All the rates that are included in this document include 12.5% holiday bonus. I guess that's something that is part of the work law in this country. I'm not sure why this particular percent, but I assume that's something standard. And also something that many people don't think of, but they should. Further down it says, for the creation of layout, general graphic design, graphic arrangement, graphics for web and graphic or visual facilitation, the minimum payment is 887 Danish krone per hour. And I'm sure that most people hearing this will be like, oh my god, per hour? Hi there. Stopping by for a quick editor's note because in the original video I went on way too long of a rant about this number, so I'm trying to summarize what was said. Basically, I know that to many people, especially internationals, especially people who are just starting, this number sounds insane. It does sound a little bit insane to me because I don't think I've ever been paid that much per hour, and it can be very intimidating to ask that of someone. But you're not going to get very far ahead if you're charging basically a minimum wage, so to say, for this kind of work, or even below from what I've seen. It is, in my opinion, better to stick with higher prices and demand those and refuse clients and work that are pressuring you to do something for way cheap or even sometimes for free. Trust me on this, from personal experience, this never works, so don't take it. If you have to, have a second job that pays your bills so that you can demand prices that are fair to you and to the market and your fellow designers and illustrators. Okay, back to past me. From the 1st of June 2021, the minimum payment is 905 per hour, and as of June 2022, the minimum payment is 922 per hour. So actually I did a bad job because I broke this up kind of. So currently the acceptable fee for these services, let's go over them again. Creation of layout, general graphic design, graphic arrangement, graphics for web and graphic or visual facilitation, 922 per hour. And it continues for work based on a concept, and if the work can be seen as cleaned up artwork, for example, pre-press layouting, the minimum payment is 679 per hour. For 2021, it is 693 per hour, and 2022, 706 per hour. So this bit was a bit confusing for me when I was translating. It still is, but the way I understand it right now is there seems to be a bit of a hierarchy of tasks, of how high certain tasks are valued. So in the first category we had this general graphic design and web design sort of work. Here, how I understand this bit where the price per hour is a bit lower, that's work, seems like it's mostly layouting or cleanup work. This is based on a concept, so you didn't come up with the concept, you were given pretty much some guidelines and you sort of just cleaned up somebody else's idea, which is why this is valued lower. I'm not sure how much I personally agree with that, but that's how this document treats this sort of work. And if you know better and this means something else, please let me know because I would like to know. If the company or client provides a workplace and equipment and the work is carried out according to a concept and the work can be seen as cleaned up artwork, the minimum payment is 470 per hour. For 2021, that's 479 per hour, and 2022, 489 crowns per hour. So again, here we are further down the hierarchy, so to say. Here the client is providing you with workplace and equipment, so you don't have to pay for that yourself. I guess that's more relevant to employees because I don't think it happens that often as a freelancer. It can happen though. I have been provided with a workspace once or twice, I think, but the equipment, I always used my own equipment. So I guess this point is fair. I think this oftentimes has relevance also to copyright. I think when you're using their concept, their equipment, that's considered work for hire. So the copyright becomes more tricky. It's not like purely yours. You can't really sell it. But yeah, generally when you come up with all of the ideas, all of the work, you are paid more. When the client comes up with a lot of the concepts, they pay for your computer, for the Adobe package or whatever, then your payment is also a little lower. For longer term tasks, a weekly rate or other special price can be agreed upon. Pretty much what it says. Time spent on meetings and transportation in connection with the task is included by agreement in the working time. So this is something that has been really hard for me to enforce or like quantitate. What I'm trying to say is that normally you should be paid for the time that you spend in meetings and such, but it's kind of hard to make that to happen, but have it in mind and try to go for it, I would say. Next section, we get into illustration. So these prices that we talked about so far, this is mostly for graphic designers. With that kind of work, it makes more sense to price things per hour. Actually, I don't know if it makes more sense. I would say that I've always mostly charged on a project basis. But anyway, in this document, the graphic designers get more of a per hour number, while the illustrators get more of a per task price. And again, when I did mostly graphic design, I still charged per project because it seemed easier. I tried to estimate the hours and to base the project price on my hourly price. I would say I always would spend more time than predicted, so I always ended up being paid lower. There's this advice I've heard, and it's a really good one, and you should follow it if you can. When you make your pricing estimation, double it or even triple it and give that price to the client, because things blow up always more than you think they would. Again, especially with small clients, it could be really hard or impossible to get the project once you quote this kind of price. But if you are in a position, and I would recommend you put yourself in a position as much as you can to refuse these badly paid projects, just do that. So, next section is on illustration, and it starts by saying illustration work for print or digital use should, as minimum, be paid with the unit prices below. First of all, we have work for journals, trade magazines, web, etc. And we have different sort of general projects or tasks you may get as an illustrator. First, of course, we have cover work, cover drawing or illustration. That's priced at 5,447. Seriously, I don't know why they are so precise with the numbers. I kind of hate that, to be honest. I would round that to 5,500. I just can't deal with these numbers. Oh, by the way, I would also like to point out that this is not including VAT. If you're VAT registered, you always quote without VAT. And if you're not VAT registered, then it doesn't matter. So, going back. For the cover drawing or illustration of a journal, trade magazine, web, etc. in 2020, you should, as a minimum, get paid 5,447. In 2021, 5,554. And in 2022, 5,660. Actually, I'm going to, from now on, only give you the final price for 2022 because I don't think the rest are relevant. I think it makes it unnecessarily confusing. So, next unit, explanatory, commentary drawing or illustration. So, some kind of explainer illustration. That would be priced at, as minimum, 3,771. Again, I would probably round that to 4,000 at least, because who wants to deal with these little numbers? Then we have drawing or illustration. Generally, that would be 2,513. And lastly, spot illustration, which is a smaller drawing or illustration with a decorative nature. That would be 1,259. Next section is illustration for books. First we have cover, and that is 5,145. Explanation drawing inside the book, 3,430. General drawing or illustration, 2,285, and spot illustration 1,145. Next up, advertising and other commercial use. Drawing or illustration should pay minimum 5,660, and the secondary drawing or illustration 1,889. I mean, when it comes to advertising and commercial work, always go up. Next, general category, posters and postcards. For a poster, you should get paid minimum 8,809, and for a postcard 5,660. And lastly, we have comic strips. A single strip would cost 3,137, and a full page, 3 or 4 rows, would be 5,660. This blows my mind because comics are so much work. I think this is very low, but I'm not a comic artist, so it's not for me to say. And then we have bonus for digital illustration. The document explains that digital illustration may contain additional workload, for example, as a result of the illustration having to be easy to animate or to create a GIF, or if the illustration has to be converted to digital if it's not to begin with. If the task contains additional work, such as described, a supplement that reflects the additional workload is to be added in relation to the above unit price. The bonus must be as a minimum 25%. The supplement must be agreed upon upfront. For larger tasks that include many illustrations, a special price can be agreed upon. So I think this part is pretty clear. However, I just want to point out that it feels to me like this document is a little bit simplistic and it's a little bit kind of outdated, maybe based on more old-timey ideas of what illustration and graphic work is. Not that there's anything wrong with what they've mentioned, I just feel like there is a lot more that they could have included. For example, the way they mentioned here, work for animation and so on. But it's fine, it's just guidelines, it's the basics, it's fine. The next section we have, or paragraph or whatever these are, is disadvantage allowance. For work that needs to be carried out between 17 and 22 o'clock, a supplement of 50% must be granted or added to the salary in the period between 22 and 8 o'clock, as well as on weekends and during public holidays. The supplement is 75%. Weekends and holidays are counted from the day before at 4 o'clock. I think that probably is more applicable in cases when you are an employee or you are working at the office of your client, because otherwise I don't see exactly how it would be enforceable if I choose to work on a weekend or public holiday. I guess that's more up to me, so I should consider and add it to the price. Or maybe it's just something that's good to know. It's definitely something good to know. But again, I think this applies mostly to employees. And if you are in that category, it's important to make sure that you are getting this sort of bonus if you are made to work outside of working hours. If you are working for yourself, I think it's still a good practice to take that into account into your pricing. If a client wants something to be rushed and they come to you on Friday and they want it done on Monday, I think it's not necessary to explain to them all of this, but you can consider it into your pricing, and if they ask, then you can also explain it. I think it's very fair and very good to have in mind. Then we have this section, payment. Unless otherwise agreed upon, payment is made no later than 14 days after receiving an invoice for the work. I wish that would be the case, but I feel like more often than not I am paid longer than 14 days after I send the invoice, and I'm also supposed to charge interest on late paid invoices, but that would be, I think, a lot of pain in the ass to enforce, so I haven't really done it. Delivery and start of work. The freelance is not responsible for missing or delayed delivery as long as it is due to significant changes in the nature or extent of the work caused by the client. This also applies to conditions and arise through no fault of the freelancer and which are out of the freelancer's control. For example, war, natural disasters, fire, strike, lockout, or vandalism. If the start of work is delayed due to the company's circumstances and no reasonable notice has been given, and the freelancer has not had the opportunity to take on other work, compensation corresponding to a maximum of 2 days' work must be paid. So this is something that would be very good to include in your contract. If it's not already there, it would be hard, if not impossible, to enforce further on. It might be hard to enforce even if you have it in your contract without getting into more serious legal stuff, but do have it in your contract and worry about it later. I would say for situations like this, when they are described in your contract and when you start to see that the situation might be arising, like the client is responding slowly and it's approaching the deadline, it is good to communicate to them and say, hey, as per our contract, I can see that we might be about to miss the deadline because I haven't been getting the feedback I need on time. Just be aware that I cannot be held responsible for a missed deadline due to these circumstances or something. I would say that more often than not, when something is so outlined in the contract, very often when the situation arises, the client has forgotten about it or they're not thinking about it, but you bring it up, you remind it to them, and then they're like, oh yes, and then they correct their behavior more often than not. At least it's been my experience. So yeah, good point. Use, licensing and copyright. According to current legislation on copyright, the freelancer has the copyright to the parts of the product that can be seen as independent work, for example, drawings and illustrations. As a rule, the final deliverable can be published regardless of the medium or form of publication. Multiple possible simultaneous digital releases are counted as one publication, provided that they are subject to the same editorial management or organization, and the publication takes place within 7 days of first publication. Publishing on digital social media is also considered a digital edition, provided that they are subject to the same editorial management or organization. Material that is reused in whole or in part is settled at 100% of the applicable price at the time of application. Use of the work beyond what was agreed must be agreed upon and paid for separately. So all of this, again, good to have in your contract. I would say that generally speaking in graphic design, for the most part, the client owns the copyright, especially with stuff like logos. It's just not practical to have it any other way. With illustration, I feel that most of the time, again, it's hard to say if it's most of the time, but I guess in my experience, it's been all of the time. I would keep the copyright. I would say every client wants to have the copyright, but when you tell them that they have to pay 300% of the creation cost, they kind of cool off on that. And the reality is, in my experience, that they don't really need to own the copyright most of the time. So it really doesn't make sense for them to be paying for that. But if they want to, they're very welcome. So in this case, for example, let's say you have a magazine that you've made an illustration for. The price that they pay is for them to use that illustration once in some issue, and if a year or two from now they want to reuse that illustration, they have to pay again. That's what this says, from what I understand. But all of these things, very important to have in the contract and to have in mind and to explain and make clear to the client up front, because you can't come halfway through the project or at the end of the project and bring all that up and assume that they understood it as well as you. They don't. It's not their job. So put it into the contract. And then the section continues. If the work is to be used for books, bulletins, and other advertising, posters and postcards, the use is agreed at the time of the agreement conclusion. I'm a bit confused by that. Why not at the start? Drawings and illustrations must not be subjected to changes in the form of editing and copying. So that's for the client. Once you deliver your work, they're not allowed to manipulate it further unless it's specified that they can. Files ready for print or publish are to be provided unless otherwise agreed. This is something I had recently come up, and well, it comes up quite often, and it's also good to have in mind and to put in your contract that for illustration especially, what the client gets at the end is usually either or both a file that is suitable for digital use like JPEG, PNG, GIF, whatever, or a file that is suitable for print. I usually use TIFF or PDF, and they are not getting your original source file. In my case, that's the Illustrator file. It could be a Photoshop file or whatever other software you're using if you are creating the work digitally, or if you're creating it traditionally, they're not entitled to your original unless agreed up front. And if they want to have it, that's an additional charge. And it's usually, from what I remember, 100% of the creation cost. The product, including drawings and illustration, may not be lent or resold to third parties without prior agreement with the freelancer, which also applies to drawings and illustrations submitted in the selection process. So basically, your client cannot sell your work further to another client. The artist's name is stated together with the drawing. That's nice. Rights of third parties. In case that third parties' copyright protected materials is needed or is included in the creation of the work and is supplied by the client guarantees that all necessary clearing of rights and payment for use is carried out. This is again very important to keep in mind and to put into your contract, that if your client comes up with something that they ask you to reference, like a photo saying draw this, whatever it is, on the photo, or want you to base your work off of some material they have, it is their responsibility to make sure that they own the copyright to that work. And if they don't, if some kind of copyright infringement occurs based on the fact that they don't own the copyright to that reference work, that's their problem. So if someone comes to me and gives me some photos and says, I want this and that based on this and that, I assume that they own the copyright to these images and that I'm free to base my work off of it without worrying. Discrepancies. In case of doubt about the interpretation or breach of the collective agreement or about employment agreements, it must be resolved by negotiation between the employer in question and freelancer, as well as a representative from each of the parties to the agreement. If agreement cannot be reached, the case will be continued before an ombudsman in accordance with the cooperative main agreement. The cooperation is the secretariat for the cooperative arbitration system, and inquiries about the disputes are therefore directed to the cooperation. So I think this mainly concerns members of those unions or people who are employed and members. If you're not a member, I don't think you can base any kind of claim on this agreement. But however, you can use your contract that you can base off of this agreement. And yeah, in general, it's expected that if there is disagreement, both parties will try to solve it between themselves as best as they can. And if they can't, they escalate it further. Duration. The collective agreement enters into force on 1st of June 2020 and is valid until 31st of May 2023. If it is not terminated before the expiry date with at least 3 months notice, it continues to run 1 year at a time until it terminates with 3 months notice. So, as I said, as far as I'm aware, it has not been terminated before the 31st of May this year, so it's still valid. And if I see a newer copy of it, I will update the prices in the blog post that will be linked below. And that's the end of the section that concerns graphic designers and illustrators. There are similar sections, as I already mentioned, about journalists and photographers. I'm not going to include that right now. If you're in any of those groups and you want me to make a similar thing about those sections, maybe I can do that. I don't know, let me know. However, I don't feel like I know enough to make the proper commentary on that. I mean, I hope the commentary I've made on this has been helpful and useful. It's been quite a bit of work translating this whole document. If you appreciate that, if you think it was helpful, please let me know, comment or give a like or something. And if you think I'm wrong about something, let me know as well. So that's all from me for today. See you next time, and until then, have fun.